I never thought it would happen to me. My name is Alex, and I was a 35-year-old man living a good life in Atlanta, Georgia. My days were full. I worked as a project manager for a decent tech company, lived in a comfortable house in a nice part of town, valued at around $500,000, and had a wonderful group of friends. My parents, God bless them, were still around, living just 20 minutes away in their big old house, the one my dad had worked so hard to build his real estate business from. It was a beautiful place, worth over $900,000 easily, set on a couple of acres, overlooking a quiet lake. We had Sunday dinners every week. The smell of my mom's cooking always filled the air, and my dad would always tell stories about how he started from nothing and built his company, Apex Properties, into a multi-million-dollar empire, with assets totaling over $25 million across various commercial and residential properties throughout Georgia. Life felt safe, solid, like a big, warm blanket wrapped around me. I had plans, dreams for the future, like buying a bigger house, maybe starting my own little side business, nothing too wild, just comfortable growth. I trusted everyone, especially my family. That was my biggest mistake. Then one horrible Tuesday, everything changed. It happened so fast. A terrible car accident on the highway, a drunk driver, a head-on collision. Both my parents gone, just like that. The world went black. My heart felt like it had been ripped right out of my chest. The funeral was a blur, a parade of sad faces and mumbled condolences. I was numb, just floating through it all. That's when the vultures started to circle. My Uncle Robert, my dad's younger brother, was the first. He was always a slick talker, wore fancy suits, and had a way of making you feel like he was doing you a favor just by being in the room. He brought Aunt Carol, his wife, with him, a woman who always looked like she smelled something bad, and my cousin Mark, their son, who was just a few years younger than me and always seemed to be looking for an angle, always wanting something for nothing. They showed up at my parents' house the day after the funeral, before I'd even had a chance to breathe. "Alex, son," Uncle Robert said, putting a hand on my shoulder, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "This is a terrible tragedy. Your father, bless his soul, was a complicated man, and the business, Apex Properties, well, it's in a bit of a state." Aunt Carol nodded gravely, her lips pursed, as if agreeing with some unspoken financial disaster. Cousin Mark just stood there, looking at the expensive paintings on the wall, his eyes calculating. They told me the family real estate development company, the one my dad had built from the ground up, was in deep trouble. They said my dad had made some bad investments, some risky loans, and that the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, facing over $10 million in liabilities. They spun a tale about how they, being the only other family members with business experience, were stepping in to save it, to protect my parents' legacy, and to make sure I wasn't saddled with a mountain of debt. They had a stack of papers, legal-looking documents, and they talked about liabilities and assets and trusts that were empty. My parents' $25 million empire, they claimed, was about to crumble into dust. I was in no state to understand any of it. My head spun. My parents were gone, and now they were telling me their life's work was too. I just wanted it all to go away. They pushed a pen into my hand. "Sign this, Alex. It just transfers the liability, protects you from all the debt. We'll take care of everything. It's what your father would have wanted." I signed. I didn't read it. I just wanted them to leave me alone with my grief. They even offered me a sympathy gift, they called it. A small, forgotten piece of land way out in the sticks, a forgotten corner of DeKalb County, tucked away behind an old, abandoned factory. They said it was valued at a measly $10,000, maybe less, practically worthless in their eyes. "It's not much, Alex," Uncle Robert had said, patting my back again, a false smile on his face. "But it's a small piece of your family's history, and it's free and clear, a place to reflect." I took it. I was a broken man, and I trusted them, my own family. I thought they were helping me. They were gutting me like a fish. I didn't realize the full extent of the betrayal until months later, after the fog of grief started to lift a little. I saw Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol driving a brand new luxury car, a Rolls-Royce Ghost, the kind my dad had always wanted but never bought. Cousin Mark was suddenly wearing designer clothes, flashing expensive watches, and talking about new development projects in Atlanta, specifically a new luxury high-rise development worth over $50 million. The family business, the one that was supposedly in deep trouble, was booming. They had renamed it Legacy Developments. They were buying up prime real estate, building luxury condos, and their names were all over the news for successful ventures, boasting profits of millions of dollars. My parents' house, the one I grew up in, was quietly sold, not to me, but to a developer, and then flipped for a huge profit by my uncle's company. It sold for nearly $1.2 million, not the $900,000 they had originally valued it at. My childhood home gone, my inheritance gone, my future gone. They had used my grief, my trust, to steal everything. Every single asset, every property, every dollar my parents had worked for, totaling well over $25 million in assets. They had left me with almost nothing but the clothes on my back and that worthless plot of land in the middle of nowhere, valued at $10,000, a drop in the ocean compared to what they took. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I felt sick to my stomach, a cold dread seeping into my bones. My own family, the people I thought loved me, had orchestrated this elaborate, cruel deception. They weren't helping me. They were robbing me blind. My first thought was to fix it. I had to fix it. I called a lawyer, a sharp young woman I'd met through a friend named Sarah Jenkins. I explained everything, pulling out the deeds to the worthless land and trying to remember every word Uncle Robert had said. She listened patiently, taking notes. "Alex," she said gently, after reviewing the documents, "the papers you signed were ironclad. A full transfer of all your parental assets, including the business, to your uncle and aunt. It looks like you also signed waivers acknowledging the company's alleged $10 million debt and releasing them from any future claims. They covered their tracks meticulously. My heart sank, a crushing weight. But they lied. They said it was in debt." She nodded. "Proving fraud in this context is incredibly difficult, especially since you signed off on everything voluntarily, even if you were grieving. We'd need undeniable proof they knowingly misrepresented the company's true financial state, and that's almost impossible to find after the fact, especially with the way they've apparently restructured things. We tried anyway. We sent letters, legal notices. They ignored them. We threatened a lawsuit." Uncle Robert responded with a cold, formal letter from his own high-powered legal team, accusing me of harassment and making baseless claims, even threatening to sue me for $500,000 if I didn't cease and desist. They twisted the narrative, spreading rumors among family, friends, and distant relatives that I was unstable, that my grief had made me irrational, and that I was trying to exploit my uncle's kindness. People started looking at me differently. Calls stopped coming in. My friends, bless them, stood by me, but even they couldn't fully grasp the depth of the betrayal. I felt like I was drowning. My savings dwindled, dropping from $80,000 to just under $10,000 in a few months from legal fees and living expenses. I couldn't focus at work. The anger and shame gnawed at me like a physical pain. I sold my house in Atlanta just to stay afloat, getting $300,000, which went largely to clearing my own mortgage and a few remaining debts, leaving me with a little over $50,000 in cash. I moved into a small, cheap apartment on the outskirts of town, paying $1,000 a month. I took odd jobs, anything to make ends meet, losing my professional pride with every passing week. I even went out to that pathetic piece of land they had given me, hoping there was something, anything, there I could sell to get by. It was just a patch of overgrown weeds, broken concrete from the old factory, and forgotten junk. It was a barren wasteland, a monument to their cruelty, truly feeling like it was worth less than $1,000. I felt utterly worthless, just like that land. My attempts to fix things had only made me poorer, more isolated, and more desperate. I was at rock bottom, truly and completely alone. The bitterness festered inside me, a cold, hard stone in my chest. I couldn't sleep. All I could see were my parents' faces, full of love and pride, and then the smirking faces of my uncle, aunt, and cousin, enjoying the spoils of their betrayal. I went over every detail, every conversation, every signature. And then one day, while I was out on that desolate plot of land, kicking at the dirt in frustration, my shoe caught on something. I noticed something odd. There was a metal survey marker sticking out of the ground, half buried. It looked old, rusted. I dug around it, unearthing a small, weather-beaten metal box. Inside, folded and brittle with age, were maps and geological reports. Old, pre-internet stuff. Hand-drawn diagrams, cryptic notes about a unique mineral anomaly. It was a survey from decades ago, long before my parents even owned the land, likely overlooked or dismissed as too expensive to extract at the time. I looked closer. The reports talked about a rare earth mineral deposit, a specific kind that was critical for advanced electronics, something called neodymium, but it mentioned it was mixed with other common minerals, making it difficult to separate using old methods. I thought it was just more junk, another cruel joke, another reminder of my misfortune, but something nagged at me. I started spending my nights in the public library searching for information. I looked up old mining techniques, new material science, anything that might relate. My tech background gave me a slight edge, helping me understand some of the jargon, and then I found it, a breakthrough. A new, cost-effective extraction method for these specific mixed rare earth minerals had just been patented by a small, unknown company overseas. A method that made previously unfeasible deposits suddenly very, very valuable. The world's supply chain was tight for these materials, demand was exploding, and suddenly this worthless plot of land, the one my family had so carelessly given me, was sitting on a gold mine. A literal gold mine, but even more valuable. My mind raced. They had no idea. They had dismissed it as a useless plot, just a dumping ground for the old factory. They probably hadn't even bothered to look at the old survey markers, too busy counting their ill-gotten gains. They were real estate developers, not geologists or mineral experts. They wanted prime properties, not abandoned factory lots. The irony was so bitter, so sweet. The very thing they thought was garbage, the ultimate insult, was my ticket to everything. I felt a surge of cold, focused determination. This wasn't about fixing things anymore. This was about something else entirely. This was about revenge. I started quietly. I couldn't let them know. I found a specialized mineral exploration company, a small one that would work discreetly for a 10% cut of the initial find, called Geotech Solutions. They confirmed my findings, their eyes widening when they saw the sheer estimated volume and purity of the deposit. They worked with me, taking their percentage to find buyers. The demand was so high, the deals came fast. Within months, I sold the mining rights for an astronomical sum, enough money to make me a multimillionaire overnight. The initial sale, for a limited extraction period, brought in $150 million, with ongoing royalties that could easily reach another $50 million over the next decade. And that was just the start. The land still belonged to me, and there were other minerals to extract if future technologies made it feasible. I started investing, not in real estate like my family, but in tech, in renewable energy, in things that connected to the future, things that were smart and forward-thinking. I hired a private investigator, a former detective named Miller, who had a reputation for digging up dirt, paying him a hefty $20,000 retainer. His mission: find every shady deal, every corner cut, every lie my uncle and aunt had ever told, especially those surrounding my parents' will and the business transfer. He found plenty. Missing documents, doctored financial records, a witness who remembered seeing my uncle leaving my parents' house late at night with a large bag just days after the accident. The pieces were all there, just waiting to be put together. My first revenge tactic was financial. Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol's company, Legacy Developments, was growing, but like many real estate firms, they were leveraged. They had taken out large loans to finance their new luxury projects, totaling over $75 million in outstanding debt. I started quietly buying up shares in their biggest competitors. Not to control them, but to empower them to outbid Legacy Developments on key land deals by offering an extra $500,000 or even $1 million per property. I also found out which banks held Legacy Developments' largest debts. Through shell corporations and anonymous brokers, I bought large portions of their outstanding loans, accumulating nearly $50 million of their debt as my own. This meant I was now one of their biggest creditors. I didn't call in the debts immediately. I just waited, letting them feel secure, letting them think they were untouchable. They were expanding too fast, taking on too much risk, driven by their greed. I watched them from the shadows, a ghost from their past, accumulating power, my new wealth a silent, deadly weapon. My second tactic was reputational. Miller had gathered enough evidence to make even the most seasoned prosecutor salivate, but I didn't want to go to court yet. I wanted them to suffer in public first, to feel the shame I had felt. I found a well-known financial journalist in Atlanta, one known for hard-hitting investigative pieces on corporate corruption, named Rachel Thorne. I anonymously sent her a carefully curated packet of information. Copies of the original, untouched. Will Miller found a copy hidden in a safety deposit box my dad kept secret. Proof of the company's excellent financial standing, showing assets of over $25 million at the time of my parents' death, and then the falsified documents I'd signed, along with the deeds for the worthless $10,000 land. I also included the internal emails Miller had dug up, where Uncle Robert and Aunt Carol discussed how easy it would be to handle their grieving nephew and acquire the business for pennies on the dollar. The article hit the news like a bomb, titled "The Great Georgia Inheritance Grab." It didn't name me directly, but it described a prominent Atlanta family using deceptive tactics to seize a grieving relative's multi-million-dollar inheritance. It spoke of fraudulent transfers and predatory practices. The Atlanta Society pages, where my uncle and aunt loved to see their names, suddenly had their names dragged through the mud. Their business partners started backing away, costing them over $20 million in canceled deals and lost opportunities. Their banks, the very ones who now saw me as a major creditor, started getting nervous. The article even mentioned a certain barren plot of land given as a sympathy gift that later became the site of a major undisclosed mineral find, generating over $100 million for its owner. The implication was clear. They had been too greedy, too short-sighted, too cruel, and it had cost them dearly. My third tactic was psychological, and it was the most satisfying. Legacy Developments was floundering. Banks were calling in smaller loans, demanding payment on nearly $10 million of their outstanding debt. Investors were pulling out, taking out $5 to $8 million each, and their reputation was in tatters. Their newest, most ambitious luxury condo project, a towering glass building in downtown Atlanta with a projected value of $200 million, was stalled. They needed a massive injection of cash, at least $40 million, to save it from foreclosure. That's when I stepped in. I had created a new investment firm, a clean front, with a name that sounded old money and trustworthy, Zenith Capital Group. Through this firm, I made them an offer, a ludicrously low offer to buy the majority stake in their struggling company and bail out their downtown project. It was a humiliating offer, proposing to buy a company once worth over $25 million for a mere $5 million and taking over their immediate liabilities. But they were desperate. They had no other choice. Uncle Robert, looking gaunt and defeated, met me in a sterile, impersonal boardroom. He didn't recognize me at first. I had changed. My clothes were expensive, my posture confident, my eyes cold. He finally looked at me, really looked, and his face went pale, his jaw dropping. "Alex," he whispered, his voice trembling, a look of dawning horror in his eyes. "But how?" I just smiled, a slow, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. "We're here to discuss the terms of your company's acquisition, Uncle Robert." The negotiations were brutal. I made them grovel. I made them sign documents that would strip them of almost everything, leaving them with just enough to avoid outright bankruptcy, perhaps a mere $1 million from their once multi-million-dollar empire, but no real power or wealth. I wanted them to feel the same desperate helplessness I had felt. I ensured that cousin Mark, who had always been a sniveling opportunist, was fired publicly from Legacy Developments, his career destroyed before it even began, without a severance package. I made them agree to a clause that required them to publicly apologize to me for their actions, to admit their guilt in the presence of a legal team and Rachel Thorne, the journalist I had arranged to be present. They did it, their faces ashen, their voices cracking, tears streaming down Aunt Carol's face as she read the words aloud, confirming the betrayal. It was everything I had dreamed of, everything I had suffered for. But the final twist, the one that truly sealed their fate, was yet to come. After the public apology, after they had signed over everything, I told them I had one more condition. I would allow them to keep one asset, a single property, as a gesture of family mercy. Their eyes lit up with a sliver of hope, a desperate last flicker of their old greed. They had lost everything, but perhaps they could rebuild with one last asset. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single aged deed. It was the deed to the worthless plot of land, the one with the abandoned factory, the one they had gifted me, valued at just $10,000. Their faces fell, their hope evaporating instantly. Uncle Robert looked at the deed, then at me, confusion and utter despair warring in his eyes. "But Alex," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper, "that land, it's nothing. It's worthless." I leaned forward, my voice a low, chilling whisper that was loud in the suddenly silent room. "Exactly, Uncle Robert. It's worthless, just like you left me." I paused, letting that sink in, watching their faces crumble. "Except for the fact that the company I sold the mineral rights to, the one that made me a multimillionaire with over $150 million in initial revenue, is now done extracting the rare earth minerals. They've moved on. And that land? It's truly just a barren, polluted wasteland now, requiring millions of dollars in cleanup to be usable again. A monument to your greed and short-sightedness, and it's all you have left." I stood up, leaving them sitting there, utterly broken, amidst the ruins of their lives, their stolen wealth, and their shattered reputation. I walked out of that boardroom, leaving them with nothing but the dust of what they once had, and the bitter knowledge that their own cruel joke had been turned against them with devastating precision. The revenge was complete. It was satisfying, undeniably so. Every sleepless night, every tear, every moment of despair had been repaid in full. But as I stepped back out into the Atlanta sunshine, the warmth on my face felt strange. I felt a strange emptiness. The revenge had been a burning fire within me, keeping me going, giving me purpose. Now that it was done, the fire was gone, leaving only ashes. And that's when I learned some betrayals can never be forgiven, but revenge, while sweet, can leave a hollow space where the pain used to be.